In the previous video, we talked about the different types of data, and in this video, we're going to talk about breaking those types of data down even further and also the sampling methods that you can use to collect this data. So, as you know, there are two different types of data. There is qualitative data, which is words or identifying numbers, and there are also quantitative data. We're going to talk first about the different types of qualitative data. And the first type of qualitative data is called nominal data. So I would like to remember this because it starts with an N, and in the word nominal, it's kind of like name. So these are going to be words that are names, like flavors of ice cream, religions, breeds of dogs, jersey numbers, social security numbers. None of these things are more important than anything else. If I said, all right, let's list our favorite breeds of dogs, just because you have a favorite breed of dog does not make that a better breed of dog than somebody else's dog. The second type of qualitative data is going to be ordinal data, and in the word ordinal you see the word order. These are words that have value and can be ordered. So for example, your letter grades. You can't take the average of like A, B plus, B minus, but you can put those letter grades in a specific order. The other thing that you're going to see are survey answers, like strongly agree, ranging all the way from that to strongly agree. If you were ranking subjects in order of difficulty, from AP to honors to college prep to like basic level skills. On the other side, we have our quantitative data, which is our numerical data. And there's two different types of quantitative data in this aspect. So there's something called ratio data, and it has a relative zero. So what does a relative zero mean? When you have something with a relative zero, it means that when you have zero of that thing, that it does not exist. Okay, so it can be greater than or equal to zero in this case. Here's some examples. The number of Labubus that you have, your grade, the number of dollar bills in your wallet. If you have 0 Labubus, that means that there is a lack of Labubus. You do not have any of these Labubus in your possession. Now, on the other hand, there's something called interval data, and this does not have a relative zero. And what that means is that 0 in this case doesn't mean that there is a lack of whatever the thing is, okay? So it can be positive or negative, and so I like to use this example as temperature. If the temperature is 0 degrees outside, that does not mean that there is no temperature. It simply means that it's very, 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 very cold and there is temperature. Temperature exists. So in this case, 0 does not mean nothing. 0 means something, which is very cold. It can also be positive or negative numbers. So like your bank account balance, that's going to be interval data. Other things that can be an interval are going to be dates. So for example, the distance on the calendar from January 1st to January 15th, that's the same distance on the calendar from March 1st to March 15th. It's still the same number of days, so that's also interval data. Here's a few examples. If you want to pause your video right now, you can go ahead and pause it, look at the questions, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the answers. It says determine the level of measurement. The flavors of frozen yogurt are going to be nominal. The order does not matter. The amount of money in your savings account is going to be an interval. Students classified by their reading ability is ordinal. You can put those in order. And letter grades on an English essay are going to be ordinal. Here's some more examples. Go ahead and pause this. Religions are nominal. Commuting time is going to be ratio. You cannot commute negative time to work. Ages is going to be ratio. You can't have a negative age. Ice cream preference is nominal. 9 is a little tricky. It says the years of important historical events. So we first have to figure out that this, even though it's a number, a year is an identifier. A year is not quantitative here. Okay, so the year is qualitative. So we only have two options for qualitative. Is it nominal or is it ordinal? And since years can be put in order, this is going to be ordinal. And then lastly, instructors classified as easy, difficult, or impossible will also be ordinal. So now you're asking yourself, how do you get this data? And there's 4 different ways pretty much that you can get data. The first one is to do an observational study. In this observation, you are going to just watch and you do not interfere in the process. An example of this would be if you had a new product in the store, you wanted to watch what colors customers pick up and leave on the shelf. So maybe they're picking in between 2 different colors or 2 different styles, and you just stand in the background and you just watch what the customers are doing. The second one is to perform an experiment. This is usually going to involve a control and a study group. An example of this would be giving a flu shot and then tracking the efficacy of flu shots in patients over the winter. Next would be a simulation. A simulation is done with technology or AI, and it's kind of done when the experiment wouldn't really be practical. So for example, airbag simulations with a virtual crash test. And lastly, maybe the most common one is to conduct a survey where you just take a poll of people's favorite colors, or you just survey people based on whatever your interest is. And we're going to talk about surveys in a second. Here's a few more questions. You can go ahead and pause this and see if you can get the answers. It says, so a study of 213 patients is going to be an observation. A study of eating habits of toddlers is going to be a survey. You would just ask their parents. A study about expanding a freeway system. You're not going to actually expand the freeway system in the experiment. So you're going to do here a simulation. And then lastly, you would do an experiment about the human respiration system if you were testing out a new oxygen delivery system. Now, if you were doing a survey and you wanted to figure out what is the best way to conduct this survey, there's a few options that you're going to have. You're going to have actually 6 options that we talk about in this video. The first one is a convenience sample, and that is literally just convenience. So let's say you wanted to know people's favorite coffee and you're at Dunkin'. You're just going to ask random customers. It's convenient. You're already there. The second option is going to be a voluntary sample. Now, a voluntary sample is not going to give you the best results. People are going to volunteer the information. It used to be based on mail-in surveys, but now it's mostly online. You'll see surveys that pop up from time to time. An example of this is every now and then you'll be watching YouTube and it'll say, take this survey instead of watching an ad. You are voluntarily giving information to that survey. And whether or not you're answering those questions correct or not correct, it still does flaw the survey. So voluntary samples, not the best option. Now, a simple random survey is just a random sampling of people. You could do this with a name generator. You could assign everybody a number and then do a random number generator. A systematic sample is where you would survey every nth person. So if you had people standing in line, you can see in that picture on the top, they're surveying every 4th person. On the bottom, they're surveying every 3rd person. So for example, you want to know people's ages. And so you stand at the entrance to the school, you ask every 5th person who walks in how old they are, and you'll have enough people in your survey. The last two are very, very similar. So the first one is called a cluster sample. A cluster is just a little group of people. So you're going to select a group of people, and then you're going to survey all of the people in that group of people that you select. So for example, you want to know who's going to homecoming. You select 20 lunch tables, and then you ask every single student who is sitting there, yes or no, are you going to the homecoming dance or the homecoming game? That's very commonly confused with the next one, which is called a stratified random sample. And a stratified random sample is kind of the same thing. So you'll see in this picture, people are grouped first by what color shirt they're wearing. And then they selected in the top one, number 1, number 3, number 2, and number 1. So then they're picking one person from each one of those groups. So you're going to group people first by demographic, and then you're going to select subsets of each group, also known as the strata. So same example from last time, you want to know who's going to homecoming, but instead this time you go to the cafeteria and now you're going to line up people by grade. So the demographic is what grade they are in. Then you don't select everybody from the line, you select a certain number of people from each grade. So then you would select 20 people from each grade and then you would have your sample. A few questions just to check for understanding here. If you're asking every 3rd person walking in the hallway, that is going to be systematic. Distributing a questionnaire to each student and waiting for the responses is voluntary. Asking your friends is convenient. Obtain all the class lists and generate random numbers to identify who should be in your sample. That's going to be a random sample. Use random numbers to select one class from each grade. Interview every person in the class. That's going to be a cluster. And then lastly, take the people from the last question, but then break them down and interview 4 students that wear glasses and 4 students that wear contacts. Do not interview students that have perfect vision. So this is going to be a stratified random sample. These are all the other resources that I have available in my Teachers Pay Teachers. I hope this video was helpful. That's all for this video. As always, if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit like and subscribe. You can find this resource along with many others on my Teachers Pay Teachers, which is Math with B.